This is Howard Gardner and his theory of multiple intelligences by Aaron Muntz. Who is Howard Gardner? Well, Howard Gardner was born on July 11, 1943 in Scranton, Pennsylvania. His parents were Jewish refugees who had fled from Germany from the war from Nazis. They were also silent, very silent concerning those said experiences. Gardner himself had said that his parents were unable to communicate their experiences concerning these things, perhaps because of psychological trauma involved. Another thing that his parents were very silent concerning was his brother Eric, who had died before Howard was born at 7 years of age in a sledding accident. Howard had seen pictures in his household, and his parents had told him that this child was simply one from the neighborhood. He didn't discover the truth about his brother until he was 10 years of age when he found newspaper clippings of the incident. These two instances of his parents being Jewish refugees and in the death of his brother Eric were largely impactful to Howard Gardner in his pursuit of psychology, dealing with how human beings reflect on information and deal with the events around them. Education experiences. Howard had attended Harvard College in 1961. His initial intention was to major in history. However, when he was a junior and senior, he was mentored by this renowned psychologist, Erik Erikson. If you're unfamiliar with Erik Erikson, he made the life stages of human development, beginning in infancy and ending in maturity. So you grow through these stages of life, and there's a dichotomy within them, how an individual engages the world around them. Perhaps this influences how Howard had created his theory of multiple intelligences and the understanding of the adaptation and the eclectic nature of human growth. After graduation, he spent a year at London School of Economics where he studied philosophy and sociology before heading back to Harvard to do doctoral studies and getting a PhD in developmental psychology in 1971. Notable attentions by Howard Gardner. He began his occupation by being a postdoctoral fellow at Boston Veterans Administration Hospital, where he worked with neurologist Norman Geschwind. This is highly important with the understanding of his production of the multiple intelligences, because Howard Gardner grew from an experience of philosophical background and biological background, which is largely presented in his understanding of intelligences, both in the understanding of nurture and in nature. He then proceeded to go back to Harvard, instructing in 1986. Two projects that he was influential concerning with Harvard was Project Zero and the Good Work Project. Both of these projects represent the values of Harvard's mission for an ethical and a profound and beneficial form of citizenship in the world around them, and creating forms that are beneficial for understanding each other and how that is actively represented in how we treat each other and how we live with each other in society. He then was the John H. and Elizabeth A. Hobbs Professor of Cognition Education in 1998 before retiring from instruction in 2019. His theory of multiple intelligences, very brief in representation before we go on in the thicker. He thought that there was 8 different intelligences: linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, musical, bodily, kinesthetic, naturalistic, intrapersonal, and interpersonal. He also said perhaps there is a 9th in existential intelligences. Before we go into each one of these, I want to look at more of the understanding of intelligence itself. Howard said that all humans, except in the case of severe brain damage, possess varying levels of all 8 forms of intelligences. This means that the 8 forms that I had listed are found and represented in everybody, and there's this fluidity and a blend between the understanding of them and how they're represented and how we engage them as people. He further understood that there was, characterized intelligences in 2 formats, a searchlight and a laser light. Searchlight being a shifting between the 8 intelligences, a very broad and a very fluid form where an individual isn't focused on a main intelligence format and is absorbing information that way, but shifts between them. And other people have a laser-like intelligence, which is a focus maybe on 1 or 2 of those intelligences listed, and they live their life in that adaptability, really focusing upon the growth of those forms. He also said that the learning styles are not the same as intelligences. These 8 intelligences are not the same as the way that we learn around the world, but are representations rather of the potential of each individual. Looking specifically at our intelligences, naturalistic, it's understanding living in things and the reading nature. Musical, it's discerning sounds, their pitch, their tone, rhythm, and timbre. Bodily kinesthetic, it's coordinating your mind with your body. Logical mathematical, quantifying things, making hypotheses, and proving them. Interpersonal, sensing people's feelings and motives. Intrapersonal, understanding yourself, what you feel and what you want. Linguistic, finding the right words to express what you mean. Spatial, visualizing the world in 3D. You can almost see how these are already represented in our educational format. Bodily kinesthetic being present in PE, musical in the arts of band, orchestra, choir, logical mathematical in math and science, linguistics in English and our language, spatial largely in forms of some of the extracurricular activities, but also in woodshop and home ec class, and naturalistic also more so categorized in extracurricular activities and things such as like Boy Scouts and really spending time with family and people in the world around us. And then interpersonal, intra, and inter really blend into the others. And this is one of the critiques of the intelligences, is this question about how much each intelligences influence the other and blend to them. Does intra and inter actually represent a pathway maybe of things like Jung's extrovert and introvert tendencies? Or is it the understanding that intra and inter are largely a form of growing, specifically relating to people and relating to yourself? History of IQ tests. So where did Howard Gardner build his ideas from? Well, there was Binet, who was a French individual where the government had asked him to be able to create a test format to be able to understand the mean of a student, to be able to see how students reflect that mean. Galton, his tests were largely eugenic in nature, focusing on biology, saying that intelligence is something that you're born with and you don't grow out of. Goddard, his tests were largely focused on immigrants coming into America, and he was criticized because his tests were largely influenced by the language and the culture that people were coming into, so it was hard to be able to test the actual understanding of a person when you have that language barrier. Wexler, we're getting into more of a broad understanding of intelligence here. He had 2 different tests for adults and children, and 2 sections within that test, one understanding verbal and one understanding performance IQ. I have a picture here of Einstein, because this is under this question of how we think about intelligence. Do we think about it in the work that perhaps that Einstein created? Maybe the process about how he got there, maybe the people that he interacted with, maybe the statistical data about how well he did in relation to his peers. Going on to a more thorough understanding of intelligence, David Perkins had a 3-dimensional form of intelligence measuring neural, experiential, and reflective. That of the biological, that about the knowledge from experience, and that about the intelligence gained by the action within it and how to be able to apply it and how to be able to engage the world around you. And then learnable is a combination of that experiential and reflective forms of intelligence. So what are some implications of the work? Some implications of his work is that a presentation of information in different formats to meet the needs of different students, and a presentation of information by different instructors to focus on different intelligence avenues, and intelligent learning with fellow students that can benefit from unique forms of thinking. And this is understanding presenting information in different ways, presenting it from different people, and also in engaging of that said information with the peers around you. We try to do this a lot in our educational format with having multiple teachers for multiple classes, with also a time set aside for students to be able to learn from each other. How would I use it in my own classroom? Well, specifically with relation to language, presentation of the cultural information of language that envelops different representations of the people in multiple contexts. Language is not just simply a systematic form of understanding the operations of mathematical forms, but rather it is so much more than that. A language is part of a people, so it's presenting not only the language, but also the entirety of the people, and people having that uniqueness. And so when we're learning the language and learning the people and learning that format of the culture, we're engaging multiple aspects of what that language means to the entirety of our life. Also utilizing multiple formats of presentation of information, specifically the order of grammatical structure. There's so many different ways to present how we do language, and the presentation of that language, the medium, is so important about the communication of what we want the people to know. Also, via other instructors' materials online, there's so much influence and impact of being able to direct students to other instructors that can present the material that I just presented in thorough ways that may have a different impact on the way they receive it. What are some criticisms? One of the criticisms of Gardner's theory is a lack of empirical representation. Because there's no specific test that he did to categorize it, and he gathered it from eclectic data, it's hard to present that this is something that can be categorized or is actually necessitated or present actually rather than just a philosophical ideal. Another understanding is these are two reflections of each other. Perhaps there's no longer presents useful information in categorization of individuals, or perhaps it's not including enough categories. So it's saying too broad, not broad enough. You're saying that he created a format where we can no longer actually understand who people are. And then otherwise you're saying it's not diverse enough to understand who people are. Another one is saying that it fails to present how intelligences flow between each other. So you have all these different intelligences, but how do these intelligences influence and interact with each other? Here is my references within the work concerning the material I just presented to you. This has been an understanding of Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, 8 different intelligences, perhaps 9, and the understanding of how we are able to bring ourselves in the schemas that we have of the world into assimilation and accommodation of those said schemas in different modes of thoughts while engaging the world, not necessarily in our learning experience, which would have a different impact on individual, but the understanding about maybe what we retain and how we be able to think and process things within that.